But first, big reaction and new revelations on our exclusive investigation into overlooked evidence in the Casey Anthony murder trial. Good evening, I'm Lauren Rowe. This is Local 6 News at 7. We begin with several developments in this exclusive investigation into overlooked evidence that actually never made it into the courtroom. Local 6 uncovered how prosecutors went to trial without 99% of the Anthony family's computer activity on the day that Kaylee Anthony died, including a visit on that afternoon to a website that discussed death by poison, suffocation, and plastic bags. And new today, outgoing State Attorney Lawson Lamar says he plans to meet with Sheriff Jerry Demings and his lead prosecutor to discuss what happened. Well, someone who has a pretty good idea of what actually happened is the investigator who broke this story last night at 11. Tony Pipitone is here. And Tony, we knew that possibly some heads would roll today after your investigation last night.
Well, no heads are rolling, questions are being asked, and even seasoned attorneys tell me they are astonished that evidence could be botched like this in any trial, much less the biggest one in Central Florida history. So we asked Local 6 legal analyst Luis Calderon whether the search for foolproof suffocation and the visit to that website could have been a game changer.
Yes, I mean, unquestionably they would have a really tough time giving an innocent explanation on how those search terms could have been on that browser. Not just one search, or how innocently one search could have happened, but how innocently 5, 6, 7 terms that have a clear connection to the murder or the death, how can you explain that?
Well, Jose Baez says he was ready to explain it at trial by proving it was George Anthony doing the search at that time. But tonight at 11, we'll look at how browser histories that the Sheriff's Office failed to recover could point to it being Casey doing that search.
Yeah, this is much more specific, and it seems a little more damaging than the other searches we heard during the trial. So if the state could have convinced the jury that it was actually Casey making those searches.
That's a big if.
Right.
Especially with this jury, and there's no way browser records conclusively prove who's on a computer, but because of this colossal failure by investigators and prosecutors to realize the evidence they actually had, it's a question Calderon says will haunt them.
That's ultimately the question that I think the prosecution is going to be asking itself for years to come, is would this have been the straw that broke the camel's back? You know, although there's obviously no physical evidence of her being there, I mean, it would lead one to believe that there was at least that knowledge or that guilty state of mind on the day that Kaylee Anthony died.
Or if Baez did not blame George for the searches, he could have argued it was Casey online considering suicide after her daughter drowned and her father left to dispose of the body and then go to work, because that was the defense after all.
Yeah, all right. Well, a lot of people were asking you on Facebook last night. You chatted with everybody after your story broke at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Can the state do anything with this evidence now, after the fact?
Yeah, and as I repeatedly answered last night, no, thanks to something called the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution.
All right.
She's been tried. Jeopardy is attached. There's really nothing that can be done.
Sometimes we see cases tried in federal court after they're lost in state court. What's the difference between this case and those?
Well, sometimes there are transactions that occur, maybe specific federal laws that are broken. This is a state issue. There's no crossing of state lines.
And not a federal crime to kill your daughter.
And not a federal crime.
Casey Anthony is not guilty, period. And now those who prosecuted and investigated her have some questions to answer.
All right. Well, maybe that's when the heads might start rolling. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right. Thank you, Tony.